The idea of one big cloud is being replaced quickly with the idea of many smaller clouds, but along with more clouds comes more complexity. For Tech Republic and ZDNet, I'm Dan Patterson with Steve Ranger. Steve, is the multi-cloud here?
Hi, Dan. So, what's really happening is, I think maybe I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe less. There was this idea that the cloud was just this cloud. It was just didn't really matter where the computers were. Didn't really matter what the processing was. It was just out there somewhere. And what we're increasingly realizing is that idea of the cloud as just this amorphous pool of computing isn't really how it works. And actually, it kind of does matter where this stuff is. You know, whether it's in the same country as you, whether it's the other side of the world. We were kind of sold this idea that once it goes into the cloud, it kind of like just disappears into the ether. It doesn't matter. That's not really the case.
Yeah, so this is where your data is stored will be highly impacted by the upcoming GDPR. Can you explain what this means for storing your data in multiple locations using multiple clouds?
Yeah, sure. I mean, GDPR is just one example of what's happening. So there are a lot of reasons why where your data is matters. I mean, the most fundamental one is latency. If your data is in a data center, hundreds or thousands of miles away, then it's going to take longer. It might take a fractional of a second longer, but that matters to you to get that data back and forth from the data center. So that's one reason why people are looking at more localized things. The other is legislation. So there are things like GDPR coming in. There's lots of European legislation. There's Chinese regulations. There are Russian regulations that talk about where data should be. So that tends to mean that in Europe, for example, big companies, cloud vendors, are looking at providing particular types of clouds or particular types of cloud access, so that companies in France or companies in Germany or companies in the UK can keep to the strict data protection regulations that they have to adhere to. That might mean having local staff who only having local staff who can have access to the data, things like that, or particular rules and regulations around who can access it.
And what about the risks of digital or cloud fragmentation? This surely must add complexity and perhaps overhead, correct?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, what happens is various nations are putting in place regulations and laws which are kind of at the fundamental level really probably quite good ideas around privacy, around data security. What that means is the old kind of one size fits all model goes away, so that might increase costs for cloud vendors because they have to vary their offering between different places, or they can't offer the same service at the same scale they would otherwise. So I think that's definitely an issue. From the user side of things as well, if you can't provide the same product to all of your customers across a whole bunch of nations, so that makes it harder to use services like cloud computing. In fact, we've seen some research that came out of one of the consultancies recently that suggested that quite a lot of companies are looking at this idea of digital fragmentation, this problem with having to provide slightly different services or treat their data in different ways or save their data in different ways, protect it in different ways across different geographies, is becoming something of an issue, definitely.
Well, as you report in your story, by 2021, the cloud will reach 554 billion in revenue. So digital transformation is certainly a trend impacting every single industry. If you'd like to read Steve Ranger's entire story, visit ZDNet and search for cloud computing, getting bigger but more complicated too. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to our Next Big Thing newsletter.